You're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, Renee Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen. Hello, welcome to She Became Visible. I have my friends with me here today. This is Vivian, this is Nadine, and they're going to be helping out with the podcast today. And as you can tell, the podcast is called Defying Mormonism. And I have a fabulous guest on, but I have a lot of stuff that I want to get out of the way before I bring Andy on. But I will be telling you a little bit about Andy before I bring him on. But I want to explain the title of the show, Defying Mormonism, because as many of you probably did over the holiday, we went and saw Wicked. And it's interesting. I've seen Wicked on Broadway. I've seen it in Portland, Oregon. I've seen it quite a bit on stage. I have not read the book. But when I very first saw it in New York, I don't know why, but for some reason it didn't grab me. But the more I listened to the music, the more in love I became with it. And then when I saw it again, of course, I looked at it in a completely different light. And so now going and seeing this version of Wicked, I am in a different place in my life. And of course, I looked at the movie through different lenses. And I wonder how many of you do that. You know, oftentimes you'll hear professional speakers and they will go and they'll do a presentation. And then people will come up to them and they'll say, "Thank you so much for those words. I really needed to hear that today." And then they'll say, "Well, what did I say that affected you so deeply?" And then they'll repeat a story, and the person will say, they'll get back to their room and they'll say, "That's not even in my talk. That's not even in my keynote speech." But wherever you're at in your life, you take things from the outside and you hear it differently and you feel it differently. So going and seeing Wicked, now that I have left a very high demand patriarchal religion, I looked at that movie through completely different eyes. So I want to preview that a little bit before I bring Andy on, because Andy is a licensed therapist and he deals with people that are going through deconstruction. And I feel like this is how I looked at it, because this is where I'm at. But I feel like Elphaba had to go through a deconstruction. She had these beliefs. She thought that the wizard was going to maybe change her skin color, take away all her problems. He was so powerful. He had all of this knowledge and this power, and he was going to solve all of her problems. If she could just get a visit with the wizard, he would solve her problems. And then her eyes were opened when she finally met him. And she realized that there was kind of an evil plan behind the whole facade of Oz. And she realized that he does not have any power. He's just a man. And he couldn't even read the Grimoire, the book. He didn't have the power to read it, but she did. She has the power. And when she realized that, And she realized that she had to take her life back, that it was up to her to decide how her life was going to go. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, I want to get a wicked tattoo. I mean, it was just, it meant so much more to me when I saw that. I wonder if that's how it affected you. So I want to read a little bit the lyrics to the song Defying Gravity. Now, that's probably one of my favorite songs in the whole play is Defying Gravity. But Elphaba says, why couldn't you have stayed calm for once instead of flying off the handle? I hope you're happy, says Glenda. I hope you're happy now. I hope you're happy how you've hurt your cause forever. I hope you think you're clever. Now, how many of us that have gone through deconstruction, that have left the Mormon church or the Jehovah Witness church or Seventh-day Adventist, any high demand religion, how many of you have had someone say to you, oh, well, I hope you're happy now. I hope you're happy that you've destroyed your family, that you've destroyed your legacy, that generations will fall away from now on because of what you've done. I hope you're happy. And then she says, and then Elphaba says, I hope you're happy. I hope you're happy too. I hope you're proud. How you would grovel in submission to feed your own ambition. So though I can't imagine how, I hope you're happy right now. So how many of us then turn to people that are staying in the church and we say, oh, how many of you will grovel in your submission? How many of you will put aside your critical thinking because you want to stay in the club, that you're willing to put away your integrity to stay in the community because the community is so important to you, which is what Glenda was saying in the play. But this is my community. These are my friends. I'm very popular. People love me. I'm not going to leave this. How could I leave this? Can't you just work within the system? Glenda is saying to Elphaba. And then she says, Elfie, listen to me. Just say you're sorry. You can still be with the wizard. What you've worked and waited for. You can have all you've ever wanted. But I don't want it. No, I can't want it anymore, Elphaba says. Something has changed within me. Something is not the same. I'm through with playing by the rules of someone else's game. Too late for second guessing, too late to go back to sleep. It's time to trust my instincts, close my eyes, and leap. Isn't that what those of us that have left the church, isn't that what we've said? I'm through with playing by the rules of someone else's game. Too late for second guessing. When people refer to their shelf, it's that second guessing. Well, maybe it's me. Maybe it's not the system that's corrupt. Maybe I'm just not obedient enough. Maybe I don't know how to follow the rules well enough. Maybe I don't know how to just be a team player, that I'm too much of an individual. You're always questioning yourself, right? So then she says, it's time to try defying gravity. I think I'll try defying gravity, and you can't pull me down. And then, can't I make you understand? You're having delusions of grandeur. Okay, Glenda says that to her. And how many of us have heard that? Who do you think you are? Oh, so now you're going to do this. You're going to have a podcast. You're going to bring the Mormon church down all by yourself. How many of us have heard that? And then she says, I'm through accepting limits because someone says they're so. Some things I cannot change, but till I try, I'll never know. Too long I've been afraid of losing love. I guess I've lost. Well, if that's love, it comes at much too high a cost. I mean, when you actually listen to these words, I thought this was love. They told me, the authorities, the Oz, all of the Oz behind the curtain said, where will you go? What will you do? There'll be an empty chair at the table. You will lose the love of God. You will lose the love of your community if you leave us. That's what they've said. And so she says, losing love, I guess I've lost. Well, if that's love, it comes at much too high a cost. Isn't that amazing? I'd sooner buy Defying Gravity. Kiss me goodbye. I'm defying gravity, and you can't pull me down. Glinda, come with me. Think of what we could do together. How many of us have said that to family members? How can you just let's all do this together? Let's go out together. Unlimited. Together, we're unlimited. Together, we'll be the greatest team there's ever been. Glinda, dreams the way we've planned them. If we work in tandem, there's no fight we cannot win. Just you and I defying gravity. Now that you're choosing this, you too, I hope it brings you bliss. I really hope you get it and you don't live to regret it. I hope you're happy in the end. I hope you're happy, my friend. Okay, how many of us have heard that? Well, if this is what you're going to do, I hope you're happy. I hope you find some joy. You won't find any joy, but I hope you do. So if you care to find me, look to the western sky. As someone told me lately, everyone deserves the chance to fly. And if I'm flying solo, at least I'm flying free. To those who ground me, take a message back from me. Tell them how I'm defying gravity. I'm flying high, defying gravity. And soon I'll match them in renown. And nobody in all of Oz, no wizard that there is or was, is ever going to bring me down. I hope you're happy. Look at her. She's wicked. Get her. Bring me down. No one mourns the wicked, so we've got to bring her down. I just thought that closing scene in The Wizard of Oz is so impactful because it hits home for those of us that have left a system that kept us down, that told us who we were and how we should be. And then we discovered, oh, wait, that man doesn't have the power. He doesn't even know how to read the book. He doesn't even understand. And when you start doing your research, most of us that have left the church, when we start doing research and we start realizing that these men who supposedly daily speak with God, I mean, according to Russell Nelson, he, literally gets visited by God every night. He's got his legal pad next to his bed, and yet you don't understand the Bible. You don't even understand where and how the Bible came to be. They have Bible scholars that are, disrupting just the things that you're teaching. You can't even read the book, just like The Wizard of Oz. So let me show you a little bit from the movie. I love this YouTube. Let me
tool, but he knows how to put on a show and do some tricks and convince and gaslight the land of Oz into thinking he's this wonderful wizard. This is never more evident than him doing a magic trick by pulling a coin from behind Elphaba's ear. Like, that's the best you can do, but the Munchkins probably go wild for it. We get a scene of them deciding the color of the yellow brick road as they plan the future building work for the city, and Elphaba reveals that her heart's desire is no longer to change her skin color, but for the wizard to help the animals. He agrees and sings about being a sentimental man who wants to be a parent. At which point Madame Morrible shows up, and the Grimoire is revealed to Elphaba, which is a book of spells in a secret language. Fun fact, in the lore of this world from the book, this book of spells is actually brought to Oz by the wizard Merlin from legend. It's time for Elphaba to prove herself by using the book of spells, and the wizard notes casually how the monkey chief of his guards always watches the birds fly with longing. Elphaba can read the book perfectly and is able to cast a spell to try and help the monkey live out his dreams of being a bird.
Okay. So that's, what I loved in the beginning of this was he talked about how because the wizard doesn't actually have any power, he uses all of this magic and all of these, fancy things and the big head and the smoke and the fire and all of this stuff. And it reminded me of the the 100th birthday celebration of President Nelson. In the movie, there's a scene where they first get into Oz and there's dancing and there's celebration and there's balloons and there's all kinds of things. And it reminded me of the celebration that they just did where they worshipped Oz, AKA Russell Nelson. They sang a song to him. They danced, they sang, they had, fireworks and balloons and smoke and the whole bit. Let me show you that. Bask in his life-giving light. We thank thee, O God, for a prophet. In these latter days, we bask in his life-giving light. Thus on to eternal perfection. We're singing it. I love the violin. It's my favorite instrument. Okay, this is so ironic. I got to go. See if I can rewind this a little bit. Listen to the words that she's singing and the look on her face. She's smiling. She's directing with such joy and love in her face. But listen to the words. Let me see if I can go back just a little bit. Will never such happiness know. So those of you that believe, those of you that will stay, you will be blessed in your perfection. But those that leave will never such happiness know. And she sings it with love and joy in her heart. So let's continue. Now, this woman is going to give the closing prayer. Let's listen to the words.
Our dear Heavenly Father,
we
gather as thy children across the earth. Here in this conference center theater, with gratitude in thy hearts and feelings of unity, as we express gratitude to thee for thy love, for thy fabulous plan, and for sending thy Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, to be our Redeemer. We are grateful for this time today. We've had to remember and celebrate and honor President Russell M. Nelson, our prophet.
The Wizard of Oz. We honor and we celebrate. And we thank God that he has given us this leader that fell from the sky.
Thy prophet. We're thankful that through him we have heard thy voice and we have felt thy love.
Through this man, we have felt the love and instruction from thee, from God. Through Oz, we have gotten the words of God.
We pray as we reflect on his teachings that we may be brought closer to thee. We may be brought to love one another as he, as thy Son, and as thou lovest us. We pray for him.
Okay, she is trying so hard to use the proper these and thous, that her these and thous are getting all mixed up and they're not making sense. Are you talking about Russell Nelson or are you talking about Jesus Christ? I don't know who you're talking about here. She's trying so hard. And the emotion. I love when they bring the emotion in because that means that they're speaking with the Spirit. So let's see if we can get this over with.
Our prophet dear, and say this humbly and in the name
of
this. Jesus Christ. Amen.
All right, everybody join in. Here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, President Nelson. Happy birthday.
I can't. I just can't. I mean, it's embarrassing. Of all of the prophets that this church has had since the beginning with Joseph Smith, I think probably Brigham Young, the second prophet, and this particular prophet are the most narcissistic of all of the prophets. He cannot get enough adulation. And, granted, the man's 100 years old. That's great. But in his mind and in the references that were made in many of the talks that were given, he basically teaches, I was saved. I was saved for you. He is literally, they're trying to get a medical school built at BYU, and I'm sure it's going to be the Russell M. Nelson Medical School. I mean, he is the only prophet of all of the prophets that they've had, and I can't remember how many, since Joseph Smith, there have been books written after they've died. He is the only prophet that has had a book written about him while he's still alive. And it's just, there's too many things to go into. But anyway, the comparison is just amazing. So let me go. I want to just make sure where we at here. Okay, let me speed this up. I want to show you this part too. Okay. Oh, Andy's here. Hey, Andy, hang on just a second. Okay, let me just play this for you.
Which tips Elphaba to their true intent. Furthermore, the monkey probably doesn't watch the birds longingly. The wizard was just manipulating her into casting that spell. They plan to use the monkeys to spy on the animals and report back to them, and that the wizard and Madame Morrible are the ones turning Oz against the animals, because the best way to bring folks together is to give them a real good enemy.
Okay, I just thought that was so amazing. Very great thing. So anyway, that is the beginning and the inspiration for this particular podcast, Defying Mormonism. I saw so much similarity in this movie. And my guest today is Andy Newman, and he is a therapist that deals with deconstruction. He deals with people that are having this same enlightenment that those of us that get the knowledge that we didn't have before, just like Elphaba, when she went to the wizard and she didn't have this knowledge. But when her eyes were opened and she saw that the system was fake, that she was being manipulated because they knew she had the power that they needed to control this society. And when they realize that, for many people, they lose their identity, they lose everything. So let me introduce you to Andy. And hang in there, Andy. I just got a little introduction here. So let me bring this on. So I love our thumbnail for today. I described Andy as the Tin Man because the Tin Man had a heart. And in order to be a licensed therapist, you have to have a heart. So he is our Tin Man for today's show. So who is Andy Newman? You can find him at andynewmantherapy@gmail.com. He is a licensed professional counselor. He is verified by Psychology Today, and he lives in the beautiful state of Arizona, as do I, which is fun. He says on his website, are you wrestling with overwhelming emotions from a faith crisis or transition? Unsure where to turn? Do you feel isolated as if no one truly understands your struggles, whether you're LGBTQ+, seeking affirming care, recovering from an abusive relationship, or a parent with a teen facing similar challenges, you're not alone. Just like Elphaba said, Glenda, come with me. Come with me. As a team, we can do this. Andy is your team. Andy is your Glenda. I offer a compassionate space to meet you exactly where you are, helping you navigate through the fear, pain, and uncertainty to find healing and defy gravity and authentic direction in your life. My lifelong dedication to loving and understanding others has given me a profound appreciation for people from all backgrounds. It would be an honor to help you recognize your worth just as you are, green people, right where you are. Please feel free to take advantage of my free 15-minute consultation, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have. So this is how we get a hold of Andy. Now, so I'm just going to play a quick little TikTok. That's how I found Andy, is through TikTok. I love TikTok. But let me just show you a little glimpse of what he does.
The most consistent struggle that I see people deconstructing high control religions go through is learning to trust yourself. Why might that be? Well, may I offer Exhibit A?
Of people becoming consumed with themselves and constantly proclaiming, no matter what, I live my own truth, or I do what works for me. As Paul the Apostle said, they seek their own, not the things which are Jesus Christ's. This way of thinking is often justified as being authentic by those who indulge in self-centered pursuits, personal preferences, or want to justify certain types of behavior that frequently don't match God's loving plan and His will for them. If we let our heart and mind embrace this way of thinking, we can create significant stumbling blocks for ourselves in acquiring the most priceless pearl that God has lovingly prepared for His children, eternal life. Elder Quentin L. Cook said that being sincerely Christ-like is an even more important goal than being authentic.
So there's three things that I think are problematic with Elder Suarez's comments here. Firstly, that he is outright demonizing self-trust. The implication here is that living one's life in accordance with their own values, if those are contrary to the church, is a life that is subpar or less worthy of divine approval. Don't trust yourself, trust us. I mean, Jesus, but we speak for Jesus. Don't trust us because we speak for Jesus. We are Jesus. Second, Elder Suarez is very deliberately undermining authenticity here. I think this is just kind of weird. The suggestion that being authentic and true to yourself is somehow at odds with being Christ-like is just not true. And more importantly, it's very harmful. Living authentically or being true to yourself and your personal values is essential to personal well-being. People who don't live true to their personal values suffer from serious cognitive dissonance and mental health issues, depression, anxiety, and the like. That is exactly what he is encouraging here. And then
So that is Andy's message on TikTok, and I'm sure as in his therapy practice. So once again, this man that spoke, for those of you that aren't members of the church, this is an apostle. This is a man who is a disciple of Jesus Christ. And he's saying, if you don't listen to us, if you try to think for yourself, you are going down the wrong path. You cannot trust yourself. It goes back to, so if you care to find me, look to the western sky. As someone told me lately, everyone deserves the chance to fly. So let's bring Andy on, and we will get to know him and have him talk about his business and what he does to help people going through their deconstruction. Hello. Uh-oh. I can't hear you. Okay. Technical problems. I can't hear Andy. Andy, why can't I hear you? Oh, there you go. There you go.
now we're good.
Now we're good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I was a little bit late because I was making sure it was right, and I guess it wasn't. So
no, I started early, Andy, because I knew I had this defining. I wanted to explain where the whole Defying Mormonism title came from. So I started a little bit early. I didn't want to take your time up. So
I appreciate that. And I love the theme. I just got out of the movie a couple days ago, actually, and I grew up a big Wicked fan. And it's an interesting topic for me in this present moment because I never saw Wicked through this lens as an ex-theist, as somebody who's departed Mormonism. And when Cynthia Erivo masterfully sang Defying Gravity, I was an emotional wreck in the theater when I started realizing, holy crap, this is my spiritual journey that she is singing about here. Yes. So I love the theme. I'm here for it.
That's exactly what I said. I actually read the lyrics to Defying Gravity, and I've heard that song. Yeah. I used to watch what was the TV show where they had all the young students?
Glee.
Glee. I used to watch Glee.
Yeah.
And when they sang that,
Great.
I mean, but I didn't listen to the words. I didn't feel it, because I was so still into the church. But I was exactly like you. I was sitting in the theater and all of a sudden those words were like, oh my gosh, that's exactly. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. So it was powerful and heartbreaking at the same time.
Yeah. Especially when she begged Glenda to come with me. We can do this as a team. And how many family members go through this, and they just say to their family, why can't you see what's happening?
Right.
Come with me. So talk a little bit. I introduced you a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell everyone your journey. Where were you in your transition when you started your therapy?
Yeah. Great question. So I was in what we call our PMO phase a little bit. If you're not familiar with the terminology, physically in, mentally out is a common phrase that I see ex-Mormons using or ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm sure evangelicals as well get acquainted with this kind of awkward middle ground where physically you're in the faith still, but mentally you're at least going through a faith crisis. And when I started my therapy practice, I was still very much in. And one of the biggest catalysts to that was, I'm a little more cognizant of it now as I've reflected, is mostly family. The consequences of leaving were too intense for me to consider. Probably similar to what maybe Glenda's feeling as she's standing on the balcony there with Elphaba she's getting ready to jump, and I was maybe watching some people jump, thinking, I just don't know if I can do that. There's too many consequences. What's this going to mean for me? And I was worried about what it might mean for me professionally as well, because I wound up in a practice where most of the therapists that I was working with were LDS as well, and a lot of the business that's coming to them is coming from bishops' referrals and things like that. And so I reached this crossroads really quickly in my career as I was reckoning with my own faith crisis of, if I don't take a stand, if I don't really get to a place where I'm being honest and authentic with who I am, I might really snow myself professionally into working with people who are expecting me to be a believer. And that's just not going to work for me. And so that was also kind of a catalyst for me to say, I need to figure this out right now. And that led me to leave. There's a lot more context there that maybe we'll get into, but yeah, that's loosely how it interacted with my career at first.
That's interesting though, because you chose your integrity over your profession. I mean, how many times do we hear people say, look, I'd like to leave the church, but I'm a dentist and 95% of my clients are LDS. And if I don't continue to stay in the church, they'll leave. And so I really admire that you even, actually I was going to say, because Arizona is basically little Utah. I mean, I swear.
That's where I'm at. I'm in the East Valley. Yeah.
Okay. So are you in you're in Gilbert, right?
Yes.
So yeah, Gilbert, Chandler. I mean, I remember when we first moved here, I didn't know the history. And so I remember driving through Chandler going, what? There's a church on every corner. What's going on?
Church on every corner. Can't escape it. Yeah. Every morning on my run, I run by 2 churches.
Yeah. So
I know, right? I don't do this as much as maybe flip a bird, but
CTR ring. Okay. So you're starting your therapy. You're in with other therapists, and you are like, I'm out. So then what happened?
Well, it's interesting how it happened professionally, because at first I really did. I thought that I might be committing career suicide, because I was even getting a lot of messaging from therapists like, well, this is like, what are you going to do? How are you going to get business? This is a lot of their models is we market to bishops and we get a lot of business that way.
Yes.
And so I was, my whole strategy for how to find people and what kinds of populations I wanted to work with changed. I thought I was going to work with pornography addiction. And part of my deconstruction was realizing the DSM-5 doesn't recognize pornography as an addiction. Where is this coming from? Oh, it's coming from mostly religions. Sure. Is there a thing of people who want to maybe view porn less? Yes, that's a thing. It's valid to work through, etc. But is an addiction model the proper ethical way to treat that? I'm not so sure anymore. And so that it wasn't just about religion. It was also my whole paradigm of what it meant to be an ethical therapist was shifting. And then fortunately, I wound up with a client who was going through their own faith deconstruction. And sometimes as a therapist, you have moments where it just feels appropriate to self-disclose. And so I disclosed to that client, I'm actually in a similar place. Yes, I'm going to church. Most people view me as a believer, but I don't think I believe either. And I just kind of started working with that client through the faith deconstruction. And they referred a friend to me. Their friend referred a friend to me. News got out that this is a therapist who gets it, who is understanding and even experiencing faith deconstruction himself. And it ended up being a niche that I've cracked into, and there was a lot of need there. And it's been and now I've received a lot of training for trauma work, for deconstruction work, et cetera. But yeah, that's kind of where how that snowballed, I guess.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. So what is the biggest trauma that your clients, when they come to you and they say, look, I've lost my faith, but they don't have the ability to just say, I'm out of here, and then carry on with a full identity. They know who they are. They're lost. I mean, I've heard so many people. I love, you're probably familiar with Anthony Miller. And are you familiar with Anthony Miller?
That name sounds so familiar, but I'm not going to pretend I know for sure.
He talks a lot. His wife, they're in a mixed faith marriage, as I am.
Oh, yeah.
His wife is still an active.
I too am in a mixed faith marriage. I don't know if you know that.
Are you really? That's fabulous. Oh, that's
special kind of fun.
We need to talk. My husband and I just got off the sofa. We were just having a little conversation. So.
Oh my God. He's Mormon?
He's active.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we do need to talk.
Yeah. And Anthony has a child that was that came out. And so he, as a good father, decided he would do some LDS search, that he would be able to talk to his, I can't remember if there's a son or a daughter, that he would be able to talk to his child with a faith-based conversation. And then the more he looked into it, the more he realized, oh my gosh. And he lost his faith. He saw the historical things. And he said, my whole identity, his patriarchal blessing, his plan, he's a financial planner. His plans for their future were all based around his faith. We will go on a mission. We will do this. Do I have the money to do that? And so he literally lost his identity. What's the biggest thing that your clients come to you and go, I mean, I need therapy. I am so traumatized. I need therapy. What are they saying to you?
Oh God, it's all over the place. I definitely do see themes. And I think that the way that Mormonism impacts individuals varies in several different ways, but it tends to be equally sinister, if that makes sense. So I'll give you an example of one of the more troubling kinds of situations that I see often, which is somebody who's maybe not just in a mixed faith marriage, but in a mixed orientation marriage. And you've got a situation where I'm gay and I'm in a heterosexual relationship, and nobody knows that I, number one, don't believe in the church anymore, and number two, that I'm gay. And what do I do? And so the implications of somebody like that stepping into their truth, living an authentic life, really means that they probably lose their marriage, and they might lose a lot of support as well. And so that's one angle. For the most part, people that I see when they come to me, they've already announced to friends and family that they've left the church, and now they're just kind of picking up the pieces. And so there's a combination of a lot of trauma that occurs, especially one of the biggest themes with men is trauma with like bishops' interviews, a lot of the sexual shame. With women, there's a lot of trauma around patriarchy. There's a lot of them are coming out of relationships that were problematic. Unfortunately, that's a theme that I do see. And then in the present, there's a lot of trauma surrounding how friends and family react. And while I think there's a higher percentage nowadays, I don't know if you're seeing this as well, but I would say a higher percentage of people are reacting well within the faith to people who leave, but there's enough that are still reacting very badly, that it's creating a significant psychological strain on people feeling comfortable leaving. And what I see a lot of is this dilemma of, well, I want some space to process. I want some space to figure out who I am, figure out how I feel about this. And it's hard to find that space when what you're facing is, if you choose this path, then this relationship, maybe every relationship is impacted by that. How do I fairly evaluate this when those are the stakes? And so those are the kinds of things that I see. And then there's a lot of work with helping, like this TikTok that you showed. A lot people really struggle learning to trust themselves, learning to make decisions by themselves without seeking help from some external authority. I'm spitting off a lot of random things that I see a lot of. There's probably more I could say. Is that helping get to the core of your question?
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I think it's interesting. And I always tell people, I left the church with a lot of privilege because our children have grown and gone. And we have 6 children. 3 of my children had left the church already.
Okay.
And there wasn't in my 3 oldest didn't really leave the church because of doctrinal stuff or historical information. They just kind of, especially my second son, he really just saw the hypocrisy, even as a youth. At 17, as a high school kid, he said, "Mom, those guys up there blessing the sacrament, I go to high school with them. I know what they're like in real life.
They're all drinking on the weekends."
Yeah, I've seen them at the parties. And so he saw the hypocrisy. And so that's really why he left the church. And I have a question that I'll ask you when I'll come back to that. The other one just really kind of, I don't know, I think he was a typical boy that just kind of did his thing and that kind of stuff. And he actually left the church, got married, and then his wife was kind of just a Christian. Her father was a pastor, and they had their first baby. As often happens with new parents, they go, "Oh, maybe we need to find a religion because now we have children that we're responsible for." So he said to her, "Well, I don't know any other religion but Mormonism." And so she said, "Well, I'll look into Mormonism." So they took the discussions. They got married. I, as a typical Mormon, pushed them into going to the temple. As soon as that year hit, I was like, and she just had a baby. I mean, she literally had just had a baby. And I'm like, "But we got to go to the temple. We got to go to the temple. We got to go to the temple now." And I pushed it and pushed it.
Yeah.
And then that was really hard for her because not growing up in the church, she didn't understand this. "Oh, you're mine now. I own you." And so here she is with a brand new baby, a 2-year-old, and he's off with the Boy Scouts all weekend. Plus he works a 16-hour-a-week job. Plus he's going to Mutual on Wednesday nights. And she's like, "Hello, what's going on here? I need my husband." And then they also gave her a position, and they expected, how we are supposed to give all our time, talents, breath to the church. And they expected that out of her. And she's like, "I don't even know what primary is. And you want me to conduct the primary program? I don't even know these songs." And yet they just assumed, so that really led them back out of the church, and they left the church because of that. And then my daughter left the church because she was married in the temple, and her first husband was killed in a car accident. And she started hearing things like, "Oh, you're going to have a really hard time dating because no one's going to marry you because you've already been sealed to another man." And then when she did get remarried, people would come up to him and literally congratulate him. "You are so brave for you to marry someone that you cannot be sealed with, and that your children will belong to the other guy. You're so brave." And she was like, "What?"
That's deplorable.
Yeah,
That's horrible.
Stuff that Mormonism teaches. So I had the privilege of not having my grandchildren denied to me. I don't live in Utah. We were living in Arizona at the time. I'm not in a Mormon community. So I was able to leave, pretty easily. My husband had a few problems with it, but we've worked through that. So my heart goes out to people that live in a very strong Mormon community, or they have 7 generations. People you'll hear the other, "I'm 7th-generation pioneer Mormon."
That's me.
Yeah, I can't leave.
I go all the way back. Yeah.
Yeah, that fascinates me. I always say to people like that, I go, "Well, think of it like this. What if you were 7th-generation Ku Klux Klan?" I mean, do you hang on to it? Do you go, but my grandpa, he rode through that town and I love my grandpa. At some point you have to go, that was probably a club that we should leave,
Yeah.
Interesting. So I was privileged, with my being able to leave, but it's been a fascinating journey. And I don't have I don't know what these people are going through, but I do have friends that, I have relatives, my children. I don't want to lose my grandchildren. This is the trauma that they say I can't remove records. I don't want my mother to find out that I've left the church.
I see that all the time. Yeah, people wait until parents or grandparents die to remove their name. And I appreciate you mentioning it's Renee, right? I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it. I've only read your name. I haven't heard it. Okay.
Yes.
I appreciate you mentioning that you don't know what these people are going through. And I think everybody in the deconstruction space more or less needs to recognize that. That's probably an early lesson of my career, is that my deconstruction journey is only mine. It's different for everybody. And there's a lot of themes that feel similar, right? Like I can sit down with any guy and I can make some assumptions pretty quickly, right? If a guy is coming to me, a man specifically, and he's my age, I'm going to assume very quickly, it's going to be tempting for me to assume, this guy is traumatized by bishops. This guy was told he's a porn addict. This guy has been to church addiction recovery meetings. And that's probably some of the crap that we're going to deal with. And truthfully, probably 70% of the time I'm right if I assume that, because it's a stereotype that doesn't come from nowhere. But a lot of times I'm not right. And so there's a wide spectrum of reasons people leave the church, of ways that people get traumatized by the church. And sometimes people that aren't traumatized, they just deconstructed, saw through the BS and decided that it wasn't for them anymore. And we're not dealing with religious trauma. We're literally just dealing with sorting through the minutia of what it means to leave. And so, and I stress this with people all the time as they leave. There is no reason you have to provide to somebody that justifies your right to leave a high control religion. All the justification you need is, I no longer want to go. That is it. That's all that you need. And the spectrum of what that looks like for everyone is very broad.
I'm so glad you said that, because I can't remember if I had actually filed my paperwork to remove my records. But Dr. Julie Hanks was offering like free consultation, like, kind of like what we do, a free 50. So I did a call with her and I said, I'm really nervous to tell my husband that I filed this paperwork. And I don't want the bishop to find out, because I don't want to have to be called into his office. And she said to me, you can say no. And I was like, I can say no?
Yeah.
And she went, yeah. If he says, Renee, I'd like to talk with you, you can say, no, I'm okay. I don't want to talk. Yes. It's like, I thought, I didn't know I could say no to the bishop.
Isn't it wild? It's why I see this all the time too, with people who feel like they have to go talk to a church leader at the drop of a hat. And it's very common when you leave for a church leader to call you in and say, let's talk about it, right? And what's their motive? They're probably coming from a good place. I think most church leaders are well-intended, misinformed, I would suggest, but probably well-intended. They want to help you, right? But what do they want to help you with? Well, they're going to want to help you back, right? They're going to want to address your concerns and bring things back in a way that's faithful. And when you're leaving, you're just not in that place anymore. I don't know about you, Renee, I spent 30 years in the church. I gave the church a pretty fair freaking shake. I'm done.
Yeah. Now, did you serve a mission?
I did, yes, in Canada.
Okay. So that is another thing that I think of I can't even remember, even in Jehovah Witness or even in Seventh-day Adventist, there is a step process that Mormons must go through. And for young men, like when my son, none of them served missions. And when my one son, returned and became active, that was a big thing for him. He was treated poorly because he didn't serve a mission. And there was this little club of guys. Or I remember one time when I was in the primary presidency, and this was way before I'd even deconstructed, but it was one of the things, this is one of my shelf items. I remember sitting in this primary, they brought in the bishop and I think the elders quorum president. They put them behind a curtain and all you could see were their feet. And it was like, all right, everybody, ask ask these people questions and you have to guess who it is. And so the first thing they said is, did you serve a mission? And,
Oh God.
you know, and I thought, what if they said no? What if they said no? I mean, and my son felt that when he was, you know, was very active. He was such a good scout leader and whatnot. But he's kind of treated like second-class citizen because he didn't.
The Scarlet Letter.
Yeah.
And it's something that comes up so quickly in the church. It's small talk.
Yeah.
You meet somebody. One of the first questions men get asked is, did you serve a mission and where? Right.
Yeah.
And or a lot of times they even bypass the first question and just ask you where you served a mission because they're assuming you did.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I love the hierarchy too, where it's like, where'd you serve your mission? Oh, Ohio. Really? Because I went to Japan.
I went to Zimbabwe. I was thrown in jail.
I was kidnapped.
Yeah. So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely felt that way too. I remember because I served in Canada, which is it felt to me like a stateside mission for all intents and purposes.
You weren't speaking French? Yeah.
I was in Calgary, and so it was like it was Canadian Utah.
Okay.
And truthfully, I have very positive feelings about my mission to this day. There's things about it that I've had to process and work through, but I had a very good experience. And you know, it was great there. But my initial reaction to going to Canada was, it's not. You know, I wanted the exotic, Elder Groberg, other side of heaven kind of mission experience.
Yeah, I know. My oldest daughter served a mission, and she had gone to Utah Valley before it became a university. It was just a college.
Mm-hmm.
And then she went to Logan, went to Utah State.
Utah State,
then she went to University of Utah. So she pretty much hit the universities, right?
Everything but BYU.
Yeah. She tried to avoid that. So she put in her paperwork and she said, I don't care where I go. I got to get out of Utah. She was called to the Salt Lake City mission. Oh. And she hung up the phone. I read it to her. The letter came and she was off at school and I read it to her. She hung up the phone, but she loved her mission. Because she was where she was at, she served all the way down into Cedar City. And so she worked with a lot of FLDS and worked with a lot of immigrants and it was a really great mission. She absolutely loved it. And you're right. I mean, I have a grandson. I hope he goes on a mission. My one daughter is the only one that's active in the church, and her children are amazing. And the church is great for them as far as structure and friendships, built-in friendships. And the mission is, I just wish they could make it a different format, because it's so good for these young men. It's such a good.
It's funny you say that. We had a conversation here recently. A lot of the therapists that I work around, and we're all independent, but we share office space together. But a lot of them are LDS, and we have these monthly collaboration meetings together. And the topic at our last meeting was mission health, mental health, and missions. And what a lot of these active LDS therapists are seeing is that a lot of missionaries are coming home from missions traumatized. And we just discussed, like, what's the reason for this? Are there some suggestions we can make to Salt Lake so that they can ignore us? But we still put in the effort.
So they can change the program, but not give you credit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like Sam Young, right? Yeah. We can pull a Sam Young. I'll be the sacrificial lamb, Renee. I'll let them excommunicate me.
There you go.
That's not an invitation, by the way. I don't necessarily want that mostly for my family, but I'm getting tangential here. So one of the biggest things that we recognized and highlighted in that meeting was when missionaries go out on the mission, they're leaving high school and basically, and maybe a year of college, and for the most part, every single coping mechanism is taken from you. Mm. And that, in my opinion, is one of the most problematic aspects of mission life that we need to change the format on. And I see them changing a little bit. Like you're giving you more access to family now, right? You can call family and talk to them a lot more consistently. It used to be just 4 times for the 2 years.
Yeah, I think that's what's causing the mental health issues, is they're being cooked back home again. They're connecting home. They can't break that tie because they're connecting every week. And so to me, it's like, it was much healthier for them just to say, see you in 2 years, go just like the Army guys, they join the military.
Yeah.
We're not calling mommy every week. That's my unprofessional opinion of why there's so much mental health, is because they don't break that tie. So they're always being brought back home,
Well, and all the ways that people are used to coping
So give us some examples. When you say they've lost all their coping mechanisms, what are some of them?
Music. Something as simple as music. You're not allowed to put headphones on and listen to music. You're not allowed, like all of your friends that you're used to talking to. I mean, we may disagree on this, Renee, and I'm comfortable with the disagreement. I think that the family aspect is a big deal. I don't think that breaking is very healthy for people in those formidable years. And I think that because so many other coping mechanisms are taken away, I think that we're still having issues. Video games, reading books. Think about all of the ways that teenagers regulate themselves and deal with life. You can't do any of that on the mission. All you get is your scriptures and your companion that you live with 24/7. I think that's another big factor, is living with one person randomly assigned one-on-one 24 hours for at least 6 weeks, probably 3 months, maybe 4.5 months, depending on how many transfers you stay with them. I think that they need to be in bigger groups. I think they need to have more alone time. I think that they need to be able to go to a movie, go to a concert, go experience the area they're in, and sure, come back to the work, make it at least like a full-time job. If we were to have a setup, Renee, where you're working a full-time job, but you're working 70, 80 hours a week, would we view that as a healthy job? And that is the amount of time that missionaries are putting in every week with what their schedules look like. And so I don't think that the setup is healthy at all for missionaries. And I don't think it has been ever.
You know, that's interesting, because that's so true, especially like you say. I remember comparing how once I got my phone and I became addicted. But I
like we all did. Yeah.
Yes, I reflected back to times when I would be standing in a line. Say I'm going to order a Subway sandwich, and I'm standing in a line. And I remember, I don't know why, but I remember specifically I was at this mall and I'm standing in line to get some food, and I'm just standing there. I'm looking around. I'm checking out the little board that has all everybody's, business cards on it and things like that. And you're looking at people and you're just observing what's going on. And I'm just thinking about stuff. And I compare that to now, even just sitting in a waiting room to go see a doctor or whatever. I mean, I'm practically like, where's my phone? Where's my phone? I can't just sit and look around, maybe pick up a magazine, thumb through it. It's like, I cannot not be entertained at any time. And that's different than it's ever been. Been.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
early 2000s, so this is so recent, maybe the last 24 years, where these kids have this, thing in their hands constantly. And now you're like cut off, absolutely cut off, that is really big. And then, like you say, I don't know how my husband worked a 16-hour day, right? He'd leave at 6 o'clock in the morning, come home at 6 o'clock at night, maybe. And that's what I was used to, right? Kids go to school, he goes to work, then he retires. Now he's home all the time. And I'm like, do you have someplace you could go? Because I kind of liked my free time,
Don't you golf, dude?
Exactly. I will schedule you to play golf again today. Yeah. No, seriously. So that to be with somebody constantly, I would go nuts. I would lock myself in the bathroom and
I did go nuts sometimes.
Yes.
And I had a good experience. Again, I really look fondly on my mission experience, but I think that there's a big part of that too. I think is very, very contingent on the mindset of the individual who leaves on a mission.
Yeah.
If you are leaving on a mission out of obligation to your family, to the faith, whatever, it's not really something you organically want to do, but it feels like something you have to do. It's a pretty rough setup for that committed of a 2-year time span. I desperately wanted to go, and there's a whole set of circumstances behind why for me. But because I wanted to be there so much, I think it ended up being a very good experience for me, if that makes sense. Because I bought into everything.
100%. Yeah. No, that makes sense, because I remember as just a senior in high school, a couple of missionaries, my mom had the missionaries over all the time. And I remember one of them was very honest and just said, look, I'm here because my dad said he'd buy me a car. And
stuff like that. Yeah.
And he was getting in trouble. He was flirting with all the girls on his mission. He got companions switched around because he couldn't follow the rules, because he wasn't there because he wanted to be. It's almost like forcing someone to go into rehab, right? Unless they want to be there,
Yeah. And rehab is probably easier.
They might get meth. Methadone that they give them to get off heroin. Maybe that,
methadone. Yeah.
Maybe they give them something like that. Interesting. What is the percentage of male or female? What do you see mostly in your practice?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm sure there's a way for me to run the actual number on that. I would say probably around 60-40. in favor of men. I see a lot of women. Yeah.
Wow. So you see by 60% women and maybe 40% men.
Sorry, 60% men, probably. I'd say it's maybe leaning men a little, but it might even be closer to 55-45. I don't know. I don't think, I would guess there's a lean towards men, but not much.
So do you find in your therapy that the men are more identity crisis and women are more relationship crisis? Like, I don't want to lose my kids. I don't want to lose my mom. Men are like, I don't know who I am. And I'm a bishop. I can't let my ward down. Is there an authority thing? Is there anything like that that would separate the two?
Yeah. What a great question. I'll be honest, I haven't thought a lot about that. Knee-jerk reaction to that is what I do notice with women specifically, that tends to be a very common theme that I don't see with men, is a lot of women face the reality of, I'm not sure if I ever wanted to have kids.
Yes.
And that's a tough one, because here I am, I'm 35 years old, I'm married, I've got 4 kids that I adore and I love, and they're my life, and I'm doing all these things for them, and they only exist because of the church, because I don't think I would have rushed to have kids if it weren't for the church. And what do you do with something like that? And it comes with a really complex set of emotions, because it is true for a lot of these women that if they weren't in the church, they probably wouldn't have rushed to get married. They probably wouldn't have had kids.
Yeah.
At least not as soon as they did, or maybe not as many as they did. That's true and worth examining. But it's hard to sit with that and not feel tremendous guilt. Like that I'm in some way betraying my kids, or I'm not being a good mom by thinking about this or whatever. And so I find it to be a very difficult emotion to, for women to create enough space within themselves to explore.
Yeah, that would be a huge guilt one. That was the thing for me, and I'll never know unless I could live another life and then compare the two. But I remember as a child loving babies and babysitting and dolls, and so I always wanted to have kids and never even thought of a career. Now, I was 12 when my parents joined the church, so I don't know how much of that is really just because I didn't have any other model. And it was also in the 60s. And so that's, they were living in a
culture was that way too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that could have been a lot of it. But I loved being pregnant. I loved everything about motherhood. And so that wasn't a thing. But also, I didn't understand how motherhood works. Because if I would have been taught, and this is where I will blame the church and culture, if I would have been taught that if you would like to have children, please have all the children that you would love. And then at some point, it would be really great if you pursued some interests of your own, or maybe picked up a talent that you had put down because you were busy being a mother. And that's okay too. And that's where you get, I think, the contradiction in the church, where it's like, it is never okay for you to work outside the home or have an interest that takes you away from your family. So, and you will go from being a mother to being a grandmother, and you will babysit, and you will be raising children for your whole entire life. And that was one of the things that I didn't understand. And so when you hit about 30, 35, and you go, well, that was fun. You guys all are in school now. Mommy's going to go get a job, and you're like, no, that's not okay.
Yeah.
You still have, that's the part that I was like, oh, your brain isn't formed. And so you don't understand all that. But that's the only thing, because I would not trade. I mean, I was going to go for 8-10 children if I could have, but we had some difficulty at the end, and we had to cut it off at 6. So, but anyway,
wow, 6 kids.
6 kids.
I have 3, and I think I'm tapping out.
Yeah.
I love these 3 so much, and I'm good.
Yeah. I think 4. Most of my kids have 4 kids, and that's a nice number. I love the 4. So that's a large family in today's world. That's in
this economy.
That's a minivan and maybe at least 3 bedrooms, if not 4-bedroom home, which is more expensive.
I love my Kia Carnival.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so with men then, and what about couples? Because you also do couples therapy.
I do some couples work too. Yeah. With couples, it's actually watching what happens with an ex-Mormon couple is actually very surprising to me. It is very common when both leave the church together for eventually for them to really reckon with kind of a similar concept of what I just explored with kids, but with our marriage. So we're kind of stripping everything to the bones. We're deconstructing. And now I'm realizing, would I have chosen this person if it weren't for the church?
Yeah.
Is this the kind of person that I would want to get married to? And I see people hit this intersect all the time with couples. And it's kind of exciting to get them or to see them in that space, because what I see happening, unfortunately, sometimes, yes, it does mean that couples end up going their separate ways. They split, which I think is fine. I don't think that divorce is such a bad thing always. Right. Sometimes that's a beautiful thing, actually. But for a lot of couples, what ends up happening is you have this realization of, I don't think I would have chosen this person then, but I do choose this person today.
Wow.
And it's like that consideration walks people to a place where sometimes they renew their vows, or they have a new concept of what it means to be together. And maybe they even kind of date each other over again, which is not uncommon. I think it was Esther Perel who said people, it might've been somebody else. I think it was Esther Perel. So please fact check me, somebody out there. But typically we're married to 3 different people in our lives. And sometimes it's the same person.
Yeah.
Because people change, our marriages change. And so I think that for a lot of couples, it's about redefining, all right, what is our relationship now? Strip it down. What are we left with? And a lot of times there's less change than people think that there is at first. They kind of swing over here, figure things out, and then they walk it back to something that's maybe more of a happy medium.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it is so much the individual and the personality of the individual, the traits of an individual. Because I see a lot of marriages that were sticking together because of the church, but one of the bigger problems was the patriarchy. And when you're constantly telling men from the time they're 11 years old that they have the power of God, and that they preside in the home, and that they are the patriarch of the home, and that they are the provider for the home, and then some men take that to a level that is, abusive. And so women put up with that until their lights are turned on, and then they go, oh, I'm not doing this anymore. And I had the privilege of not having a man that had to get his identity through his, jobs at church and his work. He didn't get his identity through that. And so, that wasn't an issue. But for a lot of people, that is a big issue, where it's like, there was an abusive nature to the marriage, and being told that you should be submissive to your husband. And then, so you go along with it, and then you find out, oh, I don't have to be submissive. Oh, that's actually abusive behavior. Oh, that's new. So that's a hard one. I'm sure you probably deal with that a little bit. That's a hard thing.
Oh, absolutely.
That's personality, right?
Yeah. It really depends on the personality and the way that somebody interacted with the faith, and also what was modeled to them. I mean, even for me, this was actually one of the first arguments my wife and I had when we got married. And I'm willing to admit this. It's not my favorite story to tell about myself, because I think it's embarrassing. But now, with the context I have, but in my home growing up, the patriarch of our home, my dad, would always decide who prayed over food. It's a simple thing, right? But it was there was no question. There wasn't like, I volunteer. It was just my dad would call on somebody and then they prayed. It was just that simple. Yeah. And the way that I internalized that growing up is just that's just the way it was. The man of the house decides who prays. And my wife and I, after we get married, we're in our apartment at BYU, Idaho, married student housing. And we make our very first meal there, and we sit down to eat, and right away, without skipping a beat, she goes, I'll say the prayer. And then she starts praying. And I'm sitting there like, you disrespect my authority. It's ridiculous, right? But I was like, I should be deciding who prays. And she looked at me, and I love my wife for this. She's like, that's BS. Yeah, we're not doing that. We're not going to do that. And it was a good moment for me to be like, oh, there's different ways to do this. Because my wife she's like a spiritual giant in the church. She's very, very devout. And for her to say that to me had a pretty big effect on me, that I think helped cut through some of that patriarchy that was very strongly modeled to me and helped me crack out of that even before I started deconstructing.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny. We got married 3 weeks after my husband got back from his mission. Because
Whoa.
I was in the military. And so I said to him, look, I got 30 days. I can come back and we can date, and I have to go back to Japan. Or we could get married and you can go back to Japan with me. And he was like, okay, and I keep saying to him,
let's go.
Yeah. So I said to him, I'm waiting, we've been married for 50 years. I'm like, I'm still waiting for the proposal, So we go back, and I'm in the military. He gets a job on base, and he's driving taxi on base. And he keeps bringing people home because he's still on his mission mentally. So he picks up a family. Why don't you come back for dinner? So he's bringing these strangers back home for dinner. And finally, after about the third weirdo couple that he brought back, I said, this has got to stop. These people are go and stop this. You're not on your mission anymore. And do not ask if we're going to have companion prayers. Okay. That has got to stop too.
Ooh, yeah. I probably did cringy stuff like that too when I got home. I had a hard time letting go of my mission.
I know, it's so funny. Oh my gosh. So that is fascinating. So how long have you had your business? How long have you been doing this?
Yeah. Let's see here. Let me look at my first license was October of 2022.
Okay.
Is when I got my associate's license. So
Excellent.
Actually it was April 2022. I forgot I had a temporary one in there. Yeah. So since April of 2022 is when I first started seeing clients independently.
Oh, interesting. That's great. But I love that. I mean, it's kind of one of those jobs where even as a doctor, you're like, well, my business is banging. And you're like, is that good? Are there that many sick people out there really? But I am glad that, you're helping so many people. And I love that you're a referral, word of mouth. That's the best kind of advertising. And so you've broken off independently, or are you still with that group?
So it's with a group, but all independent. So we more or less the only actual tie that we have to each other in the office is we just pay rent together. But we know each other, and we do refer to each other and things like that. But there's no like official tie business wise. We're all our own independent therapists.
Oh, that's great.
So it's very common for independent therapists to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you refer people to another one of your, your partners because maybe they have a specialty in an area or something like that?
Yeah. So common example of that is I don't have EMDR training yet. It's something I really want to do. It's a very good trauma therapy. Just haven't been able to afford it yet.
Yeah.
And so I will often refer to one of the therapists in this office to do some EMDR, something like that.
Excellent. Yeah. So do you find yourself, you're probably familiar with Natasha Helfer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So do you find yourself in that kind of, when you were talking a little bit about pornography, and I've watched a couple of YouTubes on, like you say, the whole, when you get into a fundamental religion, this is even true with, evangelical, the definition of what is pornography. Like I remember I had a couple in our ward they were called to be,
the ARP people?
Yeah, they were kind of like a step program or something, And
they adapted the Alcoholics Anonymous program, put church language in it, and they call it the Addiction Recovery Program. And some people don't know this. I think it's relevant. A lady by the name of Jody Hildebrand helped put that together.
Oh, yay. Okay. Well, that's
Google her if you don't know who she is.
Yeah, it's really that. Don't get us
enjoy
down that hole.
Or don't enjoy.
Yeah. But, that's interesting, though, because as just like the lay authority as bishops and things like that, they have absolutely no training, no psychological training, no therapeutic training. These are just people. And the couple, she was a really good friend of mine. Her and her husband had probably the most dysfunctional marriage. And yet they're called to be, the representatives. And so they were telling me, she said, oh, I have this young girl that comes to our class all the time. And she's not married anymore. She's divorced. But, her husband, he just couldn't stop looking at Cosmo and all these different magazines. Yeah. So she's continually, and I said, okay, wait a minute here. First of all, she's divorced. She's no longer married to this guy, but she's continually coming to therapy. And his porn addiction was Cosmo. I mean, I'm Cosmo. Like, yeah. And so she's looking at me like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't think that's a porn addiction, But it's interesting listening to professionals now talk about what's normal sexual behavior, how the brain biologically works, and then what's considered in a religion, what's considered pornography.
There's a common sentiment that pornography is a drug. It's they've got a whole organization called Fight the New Drug, and here's the research on how pornography affects your brain and how it's basically meth, right? Yeah. And where that comes from is the link between pornography and drugs is that pornography does interact with the reward centers of our brain, right? Which is valid. It does that. So does food.
I was going to say, so does chocolate cake. Yeah.
Yeah. So are we going to call chocolate cake meth? Right. Yeah. There's so much more to that is left out. And the church, and I do see, I will admit, to be fair, I do try to be as fair as possible when I criticize the church, because I do think they are softening their rhetoric when it comes to addiction lately. Although, like the church does, they're doing so very quietly. They're not making any public changes. They're just kind of subtly changing things. But they are very good at throwing the word addiction around for just about anything. Renee, this is crazy to me as I think about it still, but for 30 years of my life, I believed that I was a recovering alcoholic because when I was a teenager, I drank on the weekends with my friends. And did I make some stupid choices when I was drinking as a teenager?
Yeah.
Of course I did. I was a teenager that was young and dumb, right?
Right.
Of course I got caught, and of course I got put in front of bishops. And you have a serious problem here, Andy. You are a drug addict, right? And so I believe this my whole life. And now since even when I left, I was assuring family, like, I know I have an alcohol problem. I'm not going to drink anything, and I started deconstructing that with a therapist as I was explaining things. I had a really good therapist that kind of held her hand up and challenged me and said, Andy, I don't think that you sound like an alcoholic based on your story. Yeah. And it's wild to me. You're not going to believe this, but I've drank since leaving the church very responsibly and very sparingly. And I actually don't even like it that much. Like I'll have a beer here and there, and it's nice to have, don't need to have it. But that was a way that the church had me convinced not only that I had this really deep illness and I was this awful person, because I definitely associated alcoholism with bad people, which I also don't think is fair or true. But I believed that the church was the only way to cure myself of that, which was part of that motive to get on the mission, etc. Because the church diagnosed the illness and they were the cure to that illness. And that kept me locked for a very long time.
That's sad. That is so scary. And it's like you say, it's ruining marriages because people are saying, well, I left my husband because he has a porn addiction. And I'm like, well, let's look into that a little bit more. I remember listening to one of Natasha's podcasts where she had one of her fellow therapists, and they were discussing that and the brain and everything that you were saying. It was so interesting just to realize, what's natural, biological, and how men are different than women, and the whole thing. It's just basically so simple, and it's made out to be so tragic. But anyway,
are you aware of the BYU study on this?
No.
This is fascinating. So and everyone look it up. Just go Google BYU study on pornography and relationships. So Brigham Young University, what they found in their study, they wanted to study the effects of pornography on relationships. Okay. And what they were able to determine was that the perception that porn was bad harmed relationships significantly more than the actual pornography did. Wow. So in other words, when couples believed that porn was a bad thing, it negatively impacted their relationships. When couples didn't think that porn was a big deal, it did not negatively impact their relationships.
That was not in the ensign. Nobody taught
They didn't teach you that in Sunday school.
Yeah, that wasn't in the Come Follow Me program.
All I heard was porn kills love. Porn will kill your relationship, period. And they're not so wrong because of the way that they teach it. Right. You're right. It does really significantly harm and mess with relationships permanently and sometimes irreconcilably because of the way that a spouse views pornography and just views their husband as this person who is just so consumed by it. Yeah. When they're used to, I have people who talk about, I've had women in here talk about how terrible their husband's porn addiction is, and they're looking at porn like twice a year.
Yeah. 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 It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, well, this has been absolutely fascinating. I tell everybody, I've got it at my bottom here at deconstruction/therapy. That's your Instagram, TikTok, right?
My TikTok. Yeah, I'm a lot more active on TikTok. Yep.
Yes, yes. And his TikToks, people, you've got to go to his TikToks because they're really, really informative. Like I said, that's how I found him. And you've really addressed a lot of different topics on there. And and I would love to continue this. We need to do another podcast. There's,
Yeah, this was great. I'm open to that.
Yeah. And I'm trying to decide because last January, 2024, I told my public, I said, I'm done with Mormonism. I just want to get out of this echo chamber. I really want to talk about women and menopause and health and fitness and all this kind of stuff. And that was my goal. And then Ruby Frankie and Lori Vallow.
Jody Hildebrandt. Yeah.
And all of that stuff broke. And then it was just one thing after another. Housewives of Salt Lake, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And like every week, now we got tank top garments. I mean, there was something every week.
Only in warm areas, though.
I know. And I think Arizona is warm, right? So
apparently not. I don't think they can get them here.
Not yet.
Apparently we're not hot enough here.
We're not hot enough here. You have to have humidity and heat. Maybe that's
yeah.
But I mean, there was just so many things. It just keeps drawing me back in, So I keep thinking, okay, 2025, I'm going to let this Mormonism stuff go. There's got to be something else to talk about out there. But we'll see. I don't know. I just got through watching the Fairview, Texas temple thing. So I don't know. Can you ever let it go? I mean, people go.
It's difficult. I think it gets better with time, but a lot of it depends on the community you're in. Here's what I tell people a lot, because it's a very common sentiment that members will have is, oh, you can leave the church, but you can't leave the church alone. Yeah. You're right. I won't leave the church alone. And I'll tell you why, because as long as Mormonism harms people that I love, I'm going to care about it.
Thank you for saying that, because that's what I tell, because my brother said that. He goes, why can't you just, you've left the church. Why do you walk away? I said, because my husband is a member.
Yeah.
And I watch Conference like a freaking, secret agent. I paid way more attention than I ever did, just in case they decide to bring back polygamy. I just have to keep my eye on it, just in case they make some new fantasy revelation that might involve my family. And so that's the thing. I mean, it's like it's scary when you have to keep an eye on your religion because these rules are changing constantly. And it's like, this could affect my family, and I got to be on top of it. So, like I told my husband, I said, look, if you want to just talk about spirituality, there's a great Methodist church down the road, and they just talk about Jesus and loving one another. And there's a food bank that's open on Friday. That's fabulous to me, but all of these other rules and money and all that other stuff, that's a little bit more complicated. So,
yeah. Well, and I mean, I challenge people too. Why does it matter to you that I stop talking about the church?
That's true. That's true.
What do you see right now that is affecting you in your life? I'm not telling you should stop going to church. I'm not telling you should stop believing what you believe. I'm not even targeting your community. I find a very important reason, at least for me, to raise my voice and share my feelings and thoughts and criticisms of the church is because I remember how alone I felt when I was having concerns. I was terrified. I did not know who to turn to. I did not know who to talk to. And it was online communities where I found my first safe place to actually say, hey, I'm having a concern about this, or I'm not sure about this. And I feel like that is a very important thing for me to help provide space for, and other creators to provide space for, so that people can process those things in ways that works for them. Very few creators out there in this space, and very few ex-Mormons, frankly, really care to try to drag people out of the church. No. I mean, I think that we want people to stop being hurt by the church, right? Yes. But ultimately, I'm not going to go out of my way to try to ruin somebody's faith. The people that I'm looking for are people who are going through the same thing, and I want them to know that they're not alone. I've been through it, and that there's a lot of other people going through it too.
Absolutely. Have you found, as in your mixed faith marriage, have you found it's almost like a divorce where the old group of friends take her side or they take his side? It's like that Four Seasons movie where the couple gets divorced and then the guy brings the new girlfriend into the couple and everybody's like, yeah, we're friends with Edith. We're not doing this. But did it affect your social gang?
I was lucky in that I have a pretty good group of friends that I hang out with on a pretty regular basis that are in the church. And they were all super cool about it, honestly. And so we've had a shift in our friend dynamic, but I don't think that it has anything to do with me leaving the church, actually.
Oh,
But I recognize that's not, I think that's a privileged position. Right? I think a lot of people do have that happen.
yeah. Yeah. I follow a woman that talks about just aging and how your friendships change as you age. Just because, people move away, they want to get closer to kids or whatnot. And so the people that you hung out with for 20 or 30 years, and all of a sudden you're 70 years old and you don't have any friends anymore. And, the great thing about any kind of community-based organization like the church is you have built-in friends, right? And you have people that are assigned to you to be your friend. And so when you leave the church, you don't have that anymore. But what you need to understand is outside of that kind of a system, you do have to find your own group. And so it's like when people are in dating apps or trying to find a mate, and they'll say to them, look, forget about trying to find a partner, join a hiking club, or what is your interest? Pottery. Join a pottery group, and you find people that love pottery, and all of a sudden you're dating this guy that does pottery, you do pottery, or you're both doing rock climbing, because that's an interest that you've met someone through that. And so that's the thing I think is hard for people that have left something as organized and structured as the church to say, you have to go do this. You have to go do this. And they're like, I have to do this by myself, and that's hard.
That's a double-edged sword of the church. I think one of the things that the church does arguably the best is community. Yeah. Holy crap. The community aspect of the church is phenomenal. And it's something I miss on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Even though I still benefit in some ways from the community, it just feels a little bit different, right? But the flip side of that is people are very neutered on how do I find community if it's not built in, right? Because you never have to learn that in the church for the most part. Some people do, but a lot of people don't. And so I find myself exactly what you just said, Renee, helping people realize, okay, what are your hobbies? Here's a bunch of different resources. Let's go find your people, right? Yeah. There are other ways to find your people other than just showing up to the ward and asking for the elders quorum to help move you into the area.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been absolutely amazing. I appreciate your time. I know you've had a lot of patients today, or clients today. I don't know if you call them patients.
Technically clients, but I mean, it's, yeah. People say patients all the time.
That's funny. I was just listening to Dan McClellan, and he was just saying, don't call your massage therapist a masseuse. You must call them a massage therapist. So I'm like, okay, God, I don't know if I don't, people use the term masseuse anymore, but yeah.
If Dan says it, I listen. He's awesome.
That is a biblical scripture right there from Dan.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me today. And I have some more conversations because, you can leave the church, but the church does not stop doing really stupid things. So that gives us so much content.
Yeah, they could just stop doing stupid things.
Yeah.
You're giving us low-hanging fruit here, Rusty.
And we've only got what? We've got January, February, March. We've only got 3 more months before April conference.
And then they'll give us more.
And then we'll have a whole nother year, at least 6 months more of stuff to discuss. So anyway.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thanks for joining me today, Andy. And please, everybody go to @deconstruction/therapy on Instagram and TikTok. Get to know Andy and also look him up because he does offer 15-minute consultations, complimentary consultations. And if you're going through some deconstruction and you need some professional help and you live in the Gilbert area, or you also do online, don't you?
Yeah, I do online. So if you're in Arizona, Utah, or Idaho, I'm free to work with you.
Perfect. I love it.
Yep.
So, all right. Thanks for joining me today. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Isn't he great? And I just love, you can just tell from his personality that he's a really caring person. And so if you are deconstructing and you are struggling with how to find yourself, your path, your community, seek help. And Andy is a great resource. So as he said, Utah, Arizona, Idaho, he does online consultations and he will do in-person consultations as well. And I think everybody needs a little therapy. I mean, we all do. And my son made that very clear to me over the Thanksgiving holiday. So evidently we all need a little therapy, right? So Thanks for joining me today on She Became Visible. And please, I want you to know I am not I do not have a paywall. I do not ask for donations. I do not have a Patreon. I literally do this because I love this work. And my first grade teacher told me, please stop talking, and I can't. So that's why I do this. But what I need from you is for you to subscribe. And that is the key to all podcasts. The more subscriptions I have, the better I am. The show will be well known. And there needs to be more women's voices out there. And there needs to be more women over the age of 50s voices out there. There is a huge ageism issue on podcasts. You don't see a lot of older women talking about what it's like to be an older woman in this day and age. And we need to have more guests. We need to have more voices, and that comes through subscription. So that is the algorithm. That is what they're looking at. The more subscribers I have, the more it will be pushed out there, and then we will be able to have more guests. There is a fabulous naturopath in Portland. I believe her name is Dr. Tina Moore. She is fabulous, and I want her on my show so badly. But she's not going to come on a little baby show like mine. She wants to come to a big show. And if I had more subscribers, she would come on my show, and then I could share her wisdom with you. So it's just the way it works. Subscribe, share, push the notification button. And so you will know when my next show is. I am probably I might get another show in before, I know I'm doing a Christmas Eve show. I might get another show in before the end of the year, but then we will be starting 2025 out with a bang. According to astrology, this is my year because I'm an Aries. So we'll see where that goes. So thanks for joining me today. We'll see you again on She Became Visible. Bye-bye.